Why did no one call her name when the roster was read? The room was crowded, heavy with the smell of coffee that had gone bitter hours ago. Maps lined the walls, their edges curling from the humidity. Men shifted in their seats, adjusting rifles, rubbing temples, murmuring quiet prayers. She stood in the back, close enough to hear every word, far enough to remain invisible. And when the commander's voice boomed, assigning squads, giving orders, calling names, hers was never spoken. Not even once. Her fingers curled tighter around the edge of her chair. She was told to stay back. She was told she had done her part. She was told this wasn't her fight anymore. But the words slid off her like rain on cold glass, because she knew something the others didn't, something silence had forced her to carry alone. The men didn't look at her, some out of habit, some out of doubt, one or two perhaps out of respect, but respect never kept you alive in the field. She breathed slow, in, out. The scars hidden beneath her sleeve burned like they remembered something her mind tried to forget. And then she did what no one expected. She stepped forward. The scrape of her boots on the concrete floor cut through the hum of voices. The commander stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. A silence settled like dust. She felt all their eyes, the questions, the disbelief. And still, she kept walking until she stood where she wasn't supposed to. "Assign me," she said. Her voice was steady, not loud, but steady. The commander studied her, his jaw clenched, his hand tightened on the marker he held over the map. "You're not cleared," he muttered. "I'm ready." Her words hung there, daring anyone to break them. No one spoke. Only the low hum of the old generator outside filled the gap. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not after the last mission. Not after the silence she carried back with her. Silence she never explained. But missions don't wait for healing. And sometimes healing never comes. What none of them knew, what she hadn't told anyone, was that this mission wasn't just a mission to her. It was something more. Something personal. Hours later, the rain hadn't let up. It drummed against the corrugated roof, a rhythm too steady to ignore. She sat alone at the edge of the briefing tent, lacing her boots again, though they didn't need it. Her fingers worked out of habit, not necessity. Her chest tightened with the familiar weight of anticipation, the quiet before things spun into noise and chaos. "Why'd you volunteer?" The question came low, almost cautious. She looked up. It was Ramirez, the youngest of the squad. His helmet was too big for his head, his eyes too restless for his age. He leaned on a crate, arms folded, trying to look casual. She didn't answer, not at first. Instead, she studied him. He had that look, the kind soldiers carry when they're new enough to think bravery means invincibility. The same look she once wore. "Finally," she said, "because some fights don't wait for permission." He frowned, but they said I wasn't cleared. That's not the same as not being ready." He nodded slowly as if testing the weight of her words. Then he shifted, glancing at her sleeve, where fabric hid the marks she never explained. His mouth opened as though he wanted to ask, but he didn't. He just swallowed and muttered, "Fair enough." When he walked away, she let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Questions followed her everywhere. Stares too. They all wondered. What happened out there last time? Why did she come back different? Why did she carry silence like a weapon? But the truth, she wasn't ready to tell them. Not yet. The convoy rolled out at dawn. Engines growled. Tires crushed gravel. She sat pressed between metal and silence, her rifle across her lap. Every bump in the road rattled through her bones. She kept her gaze fixed ahead, beyond the windshield to the horizon blurred by mist. Beside her, Hayes, older, quiet, hardened by too many deployments, chewed on a toothpick. He hadn't spoken since they left base. But then, out of nowhere, his voice cracked the silence. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone." She turned her head slowly. His eyes stayed on the horizon, jaw tight, words sharp but not unkind. "I'm not here to prove anything," she said. "Then why are you here?" The question lingered. She let it sit, let it twist in her chest, because the answer wasn't something she could give easily, not without unraveling pieces of herself she wasn't sure could ever be put back together. Finally, she whispered, "Because if I don't come, someone else won't make it back." He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time since she stepped forward in that room, she saw no judgment in his eyes, only recognition, the kind that came from scars of his own. By the time they reached the outskirts of the village, the sun was high but hidden behind thick clouds. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke. Dogs barked in the distance. Windows shuddered as the convoy rolled through. She scanned rooftops, alleyways, shadows that stretched too long. Her hand rested steady on the rifle across her chest, every sense sharpened, tuned to the smallest shift. "Clear," someone called from the lead vehicle. But she knew better than to trust words like that. As they dismounted, boots sinking into mud, she caught the sound, faint, out of rhythm with the rain, a metallic click, too sharp, too deliberate. "Wait," she hissed, raising a hand. The squad froze, eyes darted, hearts pounded, the silence was heavy. And then nothing, just the rain again. Somebody exhaled hard, muttering a curse. The tension eased, weapons lowered. But she didn't move, she kept listening. Because scars don't lie, scars remember. And hers whispered something the others couldn't hear. That night when camp was set up in the skeleton of an abandoned school, she sat against the cracked wall, her rifle across her knees. Sleep never came easily on missions, but tonight it felt impossible. The rain had stopped. Too much silence now. She pulled a small photograph from her pocket. The edges were worn, the colors faded. She traced her finger along the image, over the faces captured there. Faces no one else knew she carried with her. Faces that explained more than she could ever put into words. Her chest tightened, her eyes burned. This was why she stepped forward. This was why she couldn't stay back. But no one knew. Not Ramirez, not Hayes, not the commander who doubted her. Only silence knew. And silence doesn't explain. She tucked the photo back into her pocket and leaned her head against the cold wall. Somewhere outside, a dog barked once and then went quiet. The squad's breathing echoed faintly across the empty halls. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, barely audible, "Not this time." Because something was coming, something none of them were ready for. And she was the only one who could feel it. Why couldn't she sleep when everyone else did? The night stretched long, the kind that made every sound louder, every shadow longer. The school's walls groaned under the weight of wind. Water dripped from a hole in the ceiling, slow and steady, a rhythm that grated against her nerves. She lay still, back pressed against her pack, eyes open, staring into the dark that pressed down from the rafters. The others slept in uneven rows. Ramirez's snoring came in short bursts, like he was afraid to breathe too deeply. Hayes shifted every so often, his instincts too sharp to let him rest fully. And then there was Morgan, sharp-tongued, restless, whispering to himself even in dreams. But she stayed awake, watching, listening, waiting. It wasn't just vigilance, it was fear. Fear of closing her eyes and seeing what always came back, the flash of light, the screaming, the silence that followed like an endless tide. She touched her sleeve unconsciously, fingertips pressing against the fabric that hid the scars. They weren't just skin deep. They carried the memory of fire. She blinked hard, pushed it down, focused on the here, the now. Somewhere outside, gravel crunched. She sat up instantly, rifle in hand, eyes narrowing into the dark beyond the shattered window. Nothing moved, no sound followed. Her finger brushed the trigger guard, breath caught in her throat. Was it real, or just her mind replaying things it couldn't forget? Minutes passed, the sound didn't come back, but the unease stayed. At dawn, the squad gathered in the courtyard, helmets clipped, weapons checked. The air was cold, the kind that stiffened fingers and made breath visible. She pulled her gloves tighter, hiding the slight tremor in her hands. The commander's voice came through the comms, low and direct. Today we move north. Checkpoints Alpha through Charlie. No deviations. Copy, Hayes said, his voice as steady as stone. They moved out in formation, boots splashing through puddles, eyes sweeping alleys and rooftops. The village was too quiet. No children playing. No merchants haggling. Only shutters closed tight and the weight of eyes watching from behind them. Feels wrong, Ramirez muttered. Feels alive, she corrected, scanning the rooftops. They turned a corner and there it was, Alpha. A narrow bridge over a swollen creek, half-collapsed from the rains. Two men waited on the far side, rifles slung but hands too close to triggers. Their clothes weren't uniforms, but their eyes, cold, measuring, spoke enough. Hayes raised a hand, signaling hold. The squad stopped. Weapons didn't rise yet, but fingers hovered ready. One of the men called across the bridge, words in a language not everyone here understood. She caught them, though. She learned enough to hear the threat buried in the politeness. Passes closed, go back. Morgan cursed under his breath. We've got clearance. But clearance didn't matter here. Authority was paper. Power was whoever stood with a rifle and nerve enough to use it. She stepped forward before Hayes could stop her. The two men's eyes sharpened, following her movements. She kept her rifle low, her steps slow, her gaze steady. She answered in their language, her voice calm, deliberate. We're not here to stay. We'll pass and no trouble comes to you. The men exchanged a look. Surprise flickered, then suspicion. One spat to the side, muttering something under his breath. She caught it, the insult, the doubt, the suggestion she didn't belong. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. She repeated herself, firmer this time. No trouble comes to you. Silence stretched. The creek gurgled below, brown water rushing fast. Finally, the older of the two men jerked his head. Permission. Reluctant, but permission. The squad moved across. One by one, rifles ready, eyes locked. The men watched every step, but no shots came. When they reached the other side, Ramirez leaned closer to her, whispering, "How the hell did you know what to say?" She didn't answer, just kept walking. Because the truth was, she'd spoken to men like that before, too many times. Hours later, when they reached the second checkpoint, the sky had turned heavy with clouds. Thunder rumbled far off, a warning. The squad took shelter under a ruined archway, checking gear, drinking from canteens. Ramirez tossed a pebble into the dirt, restless. Feels like they knew we were coming. They did, Hayes said, wiping sweat from his brow. Then why let us through? Nobody answered. She sat apart, her back against stone, staring at the horizon. Her hands worked slowly, mechanically, cleaning the rifle that didn't need cleaning. The photo in her pocket weighed heavier with every mile. Hayes watched her for a moment. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke. What aren't you telling us? The words cut through the air. Ramirez looked up, curiosity sparking. Morgan froze mid-motion. Her throat tightened. She forced herself to keep her hands steady, her eyes down. Nothing, she said. Hayes didn't move, didn't blink. That's not true. She felt heat rising in her chest. The photo, the scars, the silence, all the things she couldn't put into words. Not here, she whispered finally. Hayes studied her for another moment, then gave a single nod. He didn't press, but the question stayed, hanging over them all. That night thunder broke. Rain hammered the broken roofs. The squad huddled in the remains of a storage house, shadows flickering in lantern light. Morgan told a story about home, about the bar his brother still ran, the one he swore he'd drink at again someday. Ramirez laughed too loud at the punchline, trying to shake off the weight of the day. Hayes smoked in silence, eyes always scanning, even when walls surrounded them. And she listened, not to the story, not to the laughter, to the storm outside, the way it drowned out every other sound, the way it pressed against her chest like a memory. When the others finally settled into uneasy rest, she slipped outside. The rain hit her face, cold and relentless. She tilted her head back, eyes closing, letting it wash over her. And for a moment, just a moment, she was somewhere else. The flash, the heat, the silence after. Her knees buckled. She caught herself against the wall, gripping stone until her knuckles ached. "Not this time," she whispered again, the words swallowed by the storm. Because this mission, this path, they were on it blind, and only she knew what lay ahead. But silence was still her only weapon. For now, when dawn came, they pushed to Charlie, the last checkpoint before the real objective. The air was clearer after the storm, but the ground was slick, mud sucking at their boots. Birds had returned, their calls sharp and strange in the aftermath. She walked point, scanning the tree line. Every rustle, every crack of a branch put her on edge. Then she saw it. A trail, subtle but there, too clean to be natural, too deliberate to be innocent. She raised a fist, halting the squad. Kneeling, she traced the mark with her gloved hand, fresh, within hours. Hayes crouched beside her, eyes narrowing. Ambush. She nodded once. Ramirez swore under his breath. Morgan checked his rifle again, jaw tight. They adjusted formation, tighter now, rifles raised, nerves sharp. Step by step, they followed the trail. The forest closed around them, thick and damp, the smell of wet leaves heavy in the air. And then snap. A branch too close, too deliberate. "Contact," Hayes barked. Shadows moved, rifles rose, the world erupted. Gunfire tore through the trees, deafening. Mud splashed as rounds hit ground too close. The squad dropped, returning fire, voices lost in the chaos. She pressed into the dirt, rifle tight to her shoulder, sighting, firing. One target down. Another moved, vanished into brush. Her heart pounded, but her breathing stayed steady. The scars on her arm burned, a reminder of the last time chaos swallowed her whole. And then she saw him. A figure different from the rest, watching, not firing, standing just far enough away that the fight couldn't reach him. Their eyes met. And in that instant, everything inside her froze. Because she knew that face. The one from the photo. The reason she'd stepped forward. The reason silence carried her. She fired, but the figure vanished. The gunfire slowed. The forest fell back into uneasy quiet. Bodies lay still among the trees. The squad regrouped, breaths ragged, eyes wide. "Everyone up," Hayes called. Ramirez raised a hand. Morgan spat into the dirt. No one was hit this time. But she stood apart, rifle still raised, eyes locked on the place where the figure had stood. Her chest heaved, her hands trembled. Hayes stepped closer. "What is it?" She didn't answer, couldn't. Because how do you explain that the ghost you've been carrying wasn't a ghost at all? Why didn't she pull the trigger sooner? The question gnawed at her as the squad trudged deeper into the woods, the smell of gunpowder still clinging to their clothes. Mud clung to their boots, branches clawed at their sleeves. Their formation was tighter now, eyes sharper, breaths uneven. But her gaze stayed fixed on the space ahead, replaying what she saw. Not a shadow, not a trick of light, a face, real, alive. One she wasn't supposed to see again. "Check your sectors," Hayes barked. His voice clipped, forcing order back into chaos. "Yes, Sergeant," Ramirez answered quickly, a little too loudly, trying to prove he wasn't rattled. Morgan muttered curses under his breath, wiping sweat and rain from his brow, his jaw grinding like he wanted someone to blame. She stayed silent, rifle steady, step sure, but inside everything was shaking. What was he doing here? How? And why did he watch but not fire? When they reached the clearing, the squad halted. Fallen logs formed a rough circle, half burned from an old fire. Hayes signaled for perimeter. Ramirez and Morgan moved out, scanning tree line. She dropped to one knee, checking the ground. Tracks fresh, moving parallel to theirs. They'd been shadowed. Her pulse quickened. "Talk to me," Hayes said, crouching beside her. She swallowed, the words stuck. If she said too much, questions would follow. If she said nothing, lives could be lost. Finally she forced out, "Not random, they wanted us here." Hayes's eyes narrowed. "You sure?" She nodded once. He studied her, jaw tight. Then he stood, motioning the squad to regroup. "Listen up," he said, voice low, sharp. "We're being tracked. Stay alert. No noise unless it's necessary. We move fast, we move clean." Ramirez's face paled. Morgan spat into the mud, muttering, "Knew this op was cursed." They moved out again, tighter now, silence heavier. Every crack of a branch set nerves on edge. Every gust of wind through leaves felt like a whisper too close. And all the while, she carried the weight of what she saw. The face. The reason she stepped forward. The reason silence was her only shield. By the time night fell, they'd found shelter in another ruin, stone walls half collapsed, roof mostly gone, the forest pressing in from every side. Lanterns flickered low. Shadows stretched long. The squad sat close, eating cold rations in silence. The storm had passed, but tension hadn't. It clung to them heavier than the damp air. Ramirez finally broke it. His voice was small, almost timid. "Sergeant, how'd they know where we'd be?" Hayes chewed slow, eyes fixed on the dirt. "That's the question, isn't it?" Silence. Morgan's eyes flicked to her, hard, accusing. "Yeah, maybe someone should answer it." Her chest tightened. She felt every gaze shift toward her. Ramirez's confused, Hayes's unreadable, Morgan's sharp as a blade. Her hands clenched around the ration pack until it crumpled. "You've been different," Morgan pressed, leaning forward. "Since day one, always one step ahead, always too quiet, like you know something we don't." "Back off," Hayes said, voice low but edged. Morgan ignored him. "No, I want to hear it. You said nothing after the last mission. You disappear for months. Then suddenly you volunteer for this one. Why? What aren't you telling us?" Her throat burned. Words clawed at her chest, but she held them back. "Because the truth would shatter them." Finally she whispered, "I'm here for the same reason as you, to make it back alive." Morgan scoffed, leaning back, muttering something too low to catch. But Hayes's eyes never left her, quiet, watching, weighing. She felt it, the walls closing in, the silence no longer enough to shield her. And the face, his face, still burned in her mind. Sleep didn't come, not for her. She sat at the edge of the ruin, rifle across her knees, eyes on the tree line lit faintly by moonlight. The others shifted in restless sleep behind her. She pulled the photo again, fingers tracing the worn edges. The same face, younger then, different but the same. She remembered the day it was taken, the sun behind them, the laughter, the promise. Her stomach knotted. She pressed the photo to her chest, whispering into the night, "Why are you here?" The forest gave no answer. But she felt it. He was close. Watching. At dawn, Hayes approached quietly, settling beside her. He didn't speak at first, just sat, staring into the trees the way she did. Finally he said, "You're carrying something." Her jaw tightened. He continued, voice low, even. "I don't need the whole story, not now, but if whatever you're carrying is walking out there with a rifle, we need to know." Her chest ached. Her grip tightened on the photo hidden in her pocket. She wanted to tell him, wanted to pour it out, to let someone else carry it for a moment. But the words stuck, her silence too practiced, her scars too deep. So she shook her head, "Not yet." Hayes studied her, eyes heavy but patient. Then he nodded once, stood, and walked back to the squad. She exhaled, her breath shaking. "Not yet. But soon." The march north was slower, heavier. The forest thickened, swallowing light. The squad's nerves were frayed, eyes darting at every rustle. Ramirez whispered prayers under his breath. Morgan muttered curses at shadows. Hayes stayed calm, his silence commanding more than any shout. And she walked point again. every step forward a battle between duty and the ghosts that followed. Then at midday they found it. A clearing too open, too quiet. Hayes signaled halt. The squad crouched low, scanning. She stepped forward, eyes narrowing, her gut twisted. Something was wrong. Then she saw it. A mark carved into the tree at the far edge, small, precise, deliberate. Her breath caught. She knew that mark. It wasn't random, it wasn't warning. It was meant for her. Ramirez whispered, "What is it?" She didn't answer, couldn't. Because answering would mean admitting the truth. That the enemy wasn't just out there. He was hers. And the silence she carried wasn't just scars. It was betrayal. That night she couldn't stay with the squad. While they settled into another ruin, she slipped away into the trees, moving silently, the way only someone who'd learned the hard way could. She followed the trail, the signs, the marks meant for her. Until she reached him. He stood alone in the clearing, moonlight cutting across his face. Older now, harder, but still him. Her chest collapsed inward, her rifle shook in her hands. He didn't raise his weapon, didn't move. Just looked at her. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. Her breath hitched. Neither should he. Why didn't she fire when she had the chance? Her rifle was raised, sight steady, finger brushing the trigger. One movement, one squeeze, and the ghost in front of her would vanish forever. But ghosts don't bleed easily, and this one carried pieces of her she thought had been buried. Moonlight fell across his face, older now, harder, but still him, the same eyes, the same silence between them, a silence thick with years and scars neither had spoken aloud. "You shouldn't be here," he said again, his voice low, measured. Her breath hitched. The words hit deeper than the weapon slung across his chest. "Neither should you." He almost smiled, almost, then it faded, replaced by something heavier, regret maybe, or warning. "You're with them now," he said. "They don't know, do they?" Her grip tightened on the rifle. She didn't answer, couldn't. He took a slow step forward, not threatening, careful. "If they knew, you wouldn't be standing here. You'd be chained, or worse." Her heart pounded, every instinct screamed to back away, but she held her ground. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice breaking into the night. He looked at her long and hard, then said, "Trying to survive, same as you." Branches cracked somewhere behind her. She spun, rifle snapping to the sound. But it was only the wind. When she turned back, he was gone. Vanished into the trees like he was never there. Her chest heaved, sweat burned her eyes. And all she had left was silence again. She slipped back into camp just before dawn. The squad still slept, curled in corners of the ruin. Hayes alone sat awake, leaning against the wall, eyes sharp even in the dim light. He looked at her as she entered, not questioning, not yet, just watching. She settled down, avoiding his gaze, pretending to check her gear. Her hands trembled slightly, betraying more than she wanted. Finally Hayes spoke, his voice quiet. "Anything out there?" She hesitated. "Nothing." He studied her, the pause, the shake in her voice, but he didn't push. Instead, he said, "Get some rest. Long day ahead." She nodded, but sleep didn't come. Not when the face she saw was still burned into her eyes. By midday, the squad reached higher ground, the forest thinning into rocky slopes. The climb was brutal, mud giving way to loose stone. Every step threatened to slip. Ramirez cursed between breaths. "Feels like we're climbing to nowhere." "Everywhere worth going feels like nowhere at first," Hayes replied. Morgan scoffed. "That's supposed to be wisdom." Hayes didn't answer. She pushed ahead, leading again, eyes scanning the ridgeline. The higher they went, the clearer the view. Villages dotted the valley below, smoke curling from chimneys. But the higher they went, the more exposed they became. And exposure meant danger. Halfway up, a crack echoed, a shot. Stone shattered inches from Ramirez's head. He dropped flat, screaming. "Contact!" Hayes roared. The squad dove for cover behind boulders, weapons snapping up. More shots rained from the ridgeline, sharp, controlled, deliberate. Not spray, precision. Her pulse spiked. She knew that kind of fire, she knew it too well. They were pinned. "Flank!" Hayes barked. Morgan Ramirez left, covering fire. Bullets ripped through stone as the squad returned fire. The air filled with the metallic tang of gunpowder, the sharp cracks echoing across the cliffs. She stayed low, rifle sight steady, searching. And then she saw him. Up on the ridge, rifle in hand, his scope sweeping the slope. Not firing at her, never at her. Her breath caught. He was leading them into fire, but sparing her. Her chest burned. Why? The squad broke through eventually, pushing higher, driving the ambush back. Bodies littered the ridge, rifles cooling in the dirt. Morgan kicked one over, spitting. They were waiting for us, again. Hayes scanned the horizon, jaw tight. Someone's feeding them. Ramirez looked pale, his hands shaking as he reloaded. But how? We're careful, we're ghosts. Morgan's eyes slid to her, sharp, accusing. Her stomach twisted. Hayes cut him off with a glare, but the tension stayed, heavy. She turned away, kneeling by the rocks where she'd last seen him. No body, no sign, only tracks leading deeper into the mountains. Her chest ached. He could have killed her, but he didn't. And she hated that she didn't know why. That night the squad camped high on the ridge. The wind howled through cracks in the rocks. No fires too visible, just cold rations and silence. Morgan broke it first. We're being led into a trap. Everyone knows it. Question is, by who? His eyes cut toward her again. She clenched her fists. Hayes's voice came firm, sharp. Enough, we watch each other's backs. No blame. Morgan muttered under his breath but fell silent. Ramirez sat hugging his knees, staring into the dark. His voice was small. I don't want to die up here. The words hung heavy. No one answered because they all felt it, the noose tightening. She sat apart again, the photo pressed in her hands. Her eyes burned. The same face, always the same. Once he stood beside her. Once he fought with her, not against. But things had changed. And Scar's hers, his spoke louder than words now. Sometime past midnight, movement stirred. Hayes shook her awake, finger to his lips. Voices. Faint from the trees below. The squad pressed low, rifles ready, listening. Shadows moved among the rocks. Torches glowed faintly, bobbing like fireflies. An enemy patrol, searching. Hayes signaled silence. Wait, watch. The patrol passed slow, too slow. Her pulse hammered. She tracked one shadow in her scope, finger brushing the trigger. Then he appeared. At the edge of the patrol, walking with them, not leading, not following. Eyes lifted, meeting hers. Even from distance she felt it, that same silence, that same weight. He gave no signal, no gesture, just looked. And then the patrol moved on, fading into the dark. She lowered her rifle, chest trembling. Hayes leaned close, whispering, "You see something." Her mouth opened, words caught. What could she say? That the man they fought was once her own. "Nothing," she whispered. But her silence was breaking. And soon it would shatter. Because in war, secrets never stay buried. And hers was about to tear everything apart. Dawn broke without warmth. The sun cut across the ridge, but its light didn't chase away the cold that gripped the squad. Frost clung to the rocks, glittering like shards of broken glass. Their breath steamed as they packed gear, each movement heavy, deliberate, tired. She moved in silence, checking the bolts on her rifle, tightening straps, tucking away the photo before anyone could see. But she felt their eyes, watching, weighing. Morgan especially. Every glance from him was a blade pressed against her back. Finally, as they started their climb higher into the mountains, he broke the silence. "You're too quiet." Hayes shot him a warning look. "So are you." But Morgan wasn't done. "She disappears every night," he said, his voice sharp, carrying over the crunch of boots on stone. "Gone for hours. Comes back with sweat on her face and ghosts in her eyes." Her jaw tightened. She kept climbing. Ramirez's voice cracked nervously. "You think she's—" "Think," Morgan snapped. "I know someone's feeding them our position, and it sure as hell isn't me." Hayes stopped dead on the trail. The squad nearly collided behind him, his voice cut like steel. "Enough. No one accuses without proof." Morgan's eyes burned. "Proof? Look at her, look at the way she—" Her fist clenched around her rifle. She turned, locking eyes with him. "Say it." "Fine." His voice dripped venom. "You're the reason we're being hunted. You're the reason they're always one step ahead." The words echoed against the cliffs. Ramirez's face paled. Hayes's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. And in the silence, she felt her world narrowing. The climb grew harsher. Loose rock gave way to jagged stone. Wind howled through the peaks, tearing at their clothes, at their resolve. Morgan stalked ahead, muttering curses. Ramirez lagged, gasping. Hayes pressed steady, unshaken. She followed, but her thoughts burned. Because Morgan wasn't wrong, not entirely. Every ambush, every shadow on the ridge, every patrol that appeared at just the right time, it wasn't coincidence. And the man behind it, the man leading them into fire, was the same man who once swore to never leave her side. It came to a head that night. They camped in a hollow beneath a cliff face, the wind shielded but the cold worse. No fire, just blankets, rations, and silence. Until Morgan broke it again. "I want answers," he said, staring at her across the circle. His voice was calm now, too calm. "Who were you looking at last night?" Hayes stiffened. "Morgan." "No, enough of your cover, enough of her silence. She saw someone. I saw the way she froze, the way she lowered her rifle. Who the hell was it?" All eyes turned to her. Her breath caught. Her fingers dug into the dirt. Ramirez's voice was trembling, almost pleading. "Is it true? You saw someone?" She couldn't answer. Because if she did, the squad would break. If she didn't, the weight of silence would crush them anyway. Hayes's voice cut low. "If you've got something to say, say it now." Her chest tightened. The photo in her pocket burned like fire. She opened her mouth. And then the mountain spoke. A flare lit the sky above, red streak tearing across the dark. Enemy signal. The ground shook with distant explosions. They froze, rifles snapping to readiness. Voices echoed on the wind, dozens, maybe more. They'd been found. Chaos. The squad scrambled, gear flying into packs, weapons locked and loaded. Hayes barked orders, sharp and fast. "Move East Ridge now." Gunfire rattled from below. Shadows swarmed the slope, climbing fast. She fired first, her shots cracking through the night, cutting down figures clawing up the stone. But there were too many. "Go, go," Hayes roared, shoving Ramirez forward. Morgan fired beside her, teeth bared. "They're her friends, aren't they? She brought them here." Her stomach twisted. "Shut up and shoot." Bullets slammed into rock around them. Shards cut her cheek. They climbed, scrambling over boulders as fire chewed the ground. She covered Ramirez, her rifle barking steady, precise, mechanical. One target after another dropped, tumbling down the slope. But then, a shot rang from above, not at her, at the ground near her. "Warning!" Her head snapped up. And there he was, silhouetted against the flare's fatting red, watching, always watching. Her chest seized. Hayes followed her gaze, his eyes narrowed. "What the hell?" Another explosion rocked the ridge. The squad staggered, dust and stone raining down. When the smoke cleared, he was gone again. But the damage was done. Hayes turned to her, his face grim, unreadable. "Who is he?" The question was quiet, too quiet. Morgan growled, "You knew him. You've been lying this whole time." Ramirez's voice cracked, panicked. "Is it true? Who is he?" Her throat closed. The words clawed to escape but stuck fast. Because to speak them was to tear the world apart. Hayes's eyes bored into hers. "Answer me." The silence stretched. The squad waited, breathless. And all she could whisper was, "Not yet." The night bled into chaos. They broke through, climbing higher still, chased by shadows, hunted by voices. But trust was broken now. Every step she felt their distance. Hayes's questions, Morgan's hatred, Ramirez's fear. Her silence was no longer protection. It was a blade cutting all of them deeper. And still through the fire, through the frost, through the ghosts of memory, she carried that photo. That face. That past. And the scars only silence could explain. Because some truths don't save. Some truths destroy. And hers was almost ready to shatter. The ridge swallowed them. High above the valley, the air thinned to needles. Every breath tore at their lungs. Every step was a gamble against slipping, tumbling into the black below. They moved like shadows, hunted shadows. The enemy's torches burned faint trails far behind, like fireflies crawling up the mountainside. Hayes led steady, his silence heavy. Ramirez stumbled, exhausted, whispering prayers under his breath. Morgan marched with his rifle clenched, not just against the enemy but against her. And she carried the weight of silence heavier than her pack. It pressed into her chest, throbbed against her ribs, begged to be released. But not yet. They found shelter at dawn. A cave carved into the ridge, its mouth jagged and dark. Hayes signaled them inside. They huddled in silence, too drained to argue, too raw to trust. Ramirez collapsed, shivering. Morgan paced like a caged wolf. Hayes leaned against the stone, arms crossed, eyes on her. He didn't have to speak. The question was already there. And she couldn't hide anymore. Her voice was raw when it finally broke the silence. "I knew him." The words cracked like glass. Morgan stopped packing. Ramirez's head jerked up. Hayes's jaw tightened. She swallowed, the taste of dust and regret on her tongue. Years ago, before all of this. No one spoke, they just waited. Her hands shook as she reached into her pack. For a moment she almost pulled it out, the photo, but her fingers froze. Not yet, not that. So she clenched her fists instead. He wasn't always this. Her voice thinned, softer than the wind. Back then he was just a soldier just like us, hungry, tired, scared. Her throat burned. And he was mine. The silence that followed was unbearable. Morgan sneered, low and sharp. "Yours. You're telling us the man trying to kill us, hunting us like dogs, is your boyfriend." Her chest flared with heat. He wasn't like this, he wasn't. Morgan cut her off. "He is now." Ramirez shifted uneasily. His young face was torn between sympathy and fear. "Why didn't you tell us?" Her eyes dropped. "Because it changes everything." Hayes finally spoke. His voice was calm but iron-hard. "Does he know you're here?" Her silence was answer enough. Morgan's fist slammed into the cave wall. "God damn it, that's why they're on us. That's why we can't shake them, because he knows her, because she's leading them right to us." "No," she snapped, sudden fire in her voice. "I haven't said a word. I haven't given him anything." But Morgan's rage was relentless. "You don't have to. All he has to do is read your silence. All he has to do is look at you." Her breath hitched, because deep down he wasn't wrong. The cave held its silence like a grave. Ramirez spoke first, his voice cracking. "So what now? If he knows her, if he's watching her, what happens when we run into him again?" She felt their eyes pinning her, felt the weight of their judgment. and in her chest, memory twisted sharp. The nights she'd spent with him, the promises whispered when war was still just an idea, not a wound. The letters, the laughter, the belief that love could outlast uniform and orders. Until one day, he disappeared. And when she found him again, he was on the other side. She pressed her forehead against the cold stone wall. Her voice trembled. I don't know. They didn't sleep that day, couldn't. Instead, they cleaned their rifles, rationed water, sharpened knives. Each movement was mechanical, ritualistic, a distraction from the storm brewing between them. Morgan kept throwing glances like bullets. Ramirez fidgeted, muttering prayers. Hayes watched her with that quiet, unreadable stare, the one that cut deeper than words. By nightfall, when the wind howled through the cave mouth and enemy torches glowed again on the distant slope, Hayes spoke. You had your chance to tell us everything. His voice was steady, cold. She flinched. I told you enough. Not for me, he said. Not for this team. Her eyes burned. And what happens when I tell you the rest? When you look at me and all you see is betrayal? When you stop seeing me as a soldier and start seeing me as a liability? Morgan barked a bitter laugh. Too late for that. Hayes didn't laugh, didn't even blink. I'm not asking for perfection, I'm asking for truth, because out there truth keeps us alive. Her chest caved inward, she couldn't breathe. And finally she whispered, he knows me better than anyone, better than you, better than this squad. That's why he's ahead of us. That's why he's always there first, because he knows what I'll do before I do it. The words gutted her. Ramirez's face went pale. Morgan swore under his breath. Hayes closed his eyes, silent for a long moment. When he opened them, his voice was low, final. Then the only way we survive is if you stop being who he remembers. The words hung heavy. Stop being who he remembers. She turned them over in her head until they cut. Because the person he remembered was the one who loved him, trusted him, followed him into fire. And if she let that die, what was left of her? The next day, they moved like ghosts again. Up through the ice, across ridges where the wind screamed and the sky burned gray, enemy shadows stalked behind them, relentless. But now, every step carried a new weight. Because she knew Hayes was right. If she wanted to save them, Hayes, Ramirez, even Morgan, she had to kill the memory of who she once was. She had to bury the woman who loved him. And she didn't know if she could. That night, as frost glittered and silence pressed, she pulled the photo from her pocket. His face stared back. Younger, softer, smiling like war couldn't touch him, like love was enough. Her tears hit the paper, small dark spots spreading. Then she folded it once, twice, tucked it deeper away. Not gone, not destroyed, but hidden like her heart, because she knew the reckoning was coming. And when it did, silence would no longer protect her. It would break her. The ambush came at dusk. The sky bled orange against the ridges, the last light dripping across the stone like fire. The squad had barely cleared the pass when the first shots cracked the air. Stone shattered, dust rose. Ramirez dropped flat, cursing, scrambling behind a boulder. Morgan was already firing back, his face twisted in fury. Hayes's voice cut sharp, cover, move. They dove, scattered, rifles spitting sparks into the fading light. Shadows swarmed the slopes, rifles flashing in rhythm, voices echoing in a language that felt like thunder. She fired steady, each pull of the trigger a heartbeat, each shot carving space for them to breathe. But her stomach twisted with every flash on the ridge. Because she knew. He was here. The fight dragged like hours, though it was only minutes. Bullets tore stone. Grenades shook the pass. The world narrowed to fire and screams and smoke. Then silence. The gunfire cut. A voice carried instead. Deep, measured, too familiar. Enough. Her chest froze. The shadows parted, and he stepped forward. The man the others saw as their hunter, their ghost, their executioner. But to her he was once warmth, shelter, the one who promised to come home. Now he stood armored, weapon slung, his eyes colder than the mountain wind. "Drop your weapons," he called. Ramirez shook, whispering prayers. Morgan spat in the dirt, defiant even as his hands tightened on his rifle. Hayes crouched, silent, unreadable. And she couldn't breathe. Their eyes met across the pass. The world dimmed. The gunfire, the wind, even the burning sky, all of it fell away. It was just him. And her. He tilted his head, the faintest trace of recognition softening his jaw. "So it's true." Her lips trembled. "Why are you here?" His answer was quiet, final. "Because you are." The squad stiffened. Hayes's gaze cut sideways toward her. Morgan hissed through his teeth. "You knew," he growled. "You knew this whole damn time." Her throat closed. "I." But the man on the ridge stepped closer, his voice carrying. "They don't understand, do they?" Her heart hammered. "Tell them," he said. "Tell them who I am." The silence burned worse than bullets. Hayes finally spoke. "Enough riddles, who is he?" Morgan's voice cracked sharp. "Yeah, say it now." Her breath came ragged. Her hands trembled on the rifle. And then, finally, she said the words that shattered everything. "He's mine." The silence that followed was louder than the firefight. Ramirez's eyes went wide, disbelief choking him. Morgan cursed, spitting fury into the dirt. Hayes didn't move at all. The man across the pass, her man, her ghost, allowed the faintest smile. "You see," he said softly, "even now." Hayes's voice was steady, lethal. "If this is some kind of game, it ends now." But the man shook his head. "It's no game, it's choice." His eyes locked back on hers. "Come with me, leave them. This doesn't have to be your war." The words cut deeper than shrapnel. Because part of her wanted to believe him, wanted to reach for the memory, the promise, the life that could have been. But the sight of Ramirez trembling, Hayes standing firm, even Morgan's fire-eyed hatred, anchored her. "This is my war," she whispered. His smile faltered. "Then you've chosen death." The standoff cracked like ice under weight. Bullets tore the air again. The pass erupted into chaos. She dropped low, firing, the choice already sealed in the thunder of her rifle. He vanished into the smoke, commanding shadows forward, each one throwing fire and steel. The squad held, barely. Ramirez's hands bled as he reloaded. Morgan screamed curses with every shot. Hayes moved like stone, unshaken, unbreakable. And her, every bullet she fired was aimed not just at soldiers, but at memory, at the man she once loved, at herself. The fight dragged them down the ridge. They scrambled over rock, through smoke, their rifles hot, lungs burning. Ramirez cried out, hit in the shoulder, stumbling. She grabbed him, dragging him behind cover, her fingers slick with his blood. Hayes covered, precise, relentless. Morgan kept shouting, kept firing, rage turning his voice raw. And then his voice again. "Closer. Stop this." Through the haze she saw him, not 10 yards away, rifle raised but not fired, his eyes locked on hers, pleading. "Don't make me kill you." Her throat tore with the words, "You already did." The world slowed. Their rifles aimed, their eyes locked. Memory flooded. Nights by candlelight, whispered plans. The ring he once swore he'd give her when the war was over. And now mountains fire blood. He whispered, "Please." She whispered, "Don't." The shot cracked anyway. Not hers. Morgan's. The bullet tore past her shoulder, slamming into his side. He staggered, the smile, what little remained gone in an instant. His soldiers screamed, dragging him back into the smoke. Gunfire covered their retreat. And just like that, he was gone. The pass fell silent again. The squad crouched in the rubble, chests heaving, ears ringing. Ramirez whimpered through clenched teeth as she tied a bandage around his arm. Hayes scanned the smoke, steady, waiting for another attack. Morgan just stared at her. "You still gonna tell us you're not one of them?" he hissed. "Because from where I'm standing, looks like you just picked the wrong side of history." Her hands shook, blood staining her fingers. Her voice cracked. "I didn't pick him, I picked you." But the words didn't feel like enough. Not for Morgan, not for Hayes, not for herself. Because even as the smoke cleared, even as the silence returned, she knew this wasn't over. He was still alive. And the next time they met, there would be no warning. No hesitation. Only an ending. Her hands lingered on the blood-soaked bandage around Ramirez. Her chest burned with unspoken grief. And in her pocket, the photo burned hotter than ever. The man she once loved. The enemy she had to kill. The silence that could no longer protect her. The storm broke at midnight. Snow swept across the ridge, turning the world to white. Wind howled like morning. The mountains seemed to groan under the weight of it all. They huddled in the hollow of broken stone, Ramirez pale and fevered from blood loss, Morgan packing with restless fury, Hayes watching the darkness like it owed him answers. And she sat in silence. The photo pressed against her chest, her rifle across her knees, her scars burning. Because she knew he wasn't finished. Not after the way they'd left him, wounded, humiliated, alive. He would come. And when he did, there would be no more words. The night stretched long, heavy. Snow piled against their boots. Ramirez drifted in and out of half-conscious prayer. Morgan cursed the cold, cursed the mission, cursed her name under his breath. But Hayes, he finally spoke. "Whatever happens," he said softly, "we finish this together." His eyes didn't move from the dark, but the words weren't for Ramirez or Morgan. They were for her. And she nodded just once. Because together was the only way this could end. The attack came before dawn. A shadow slipped through the snow, silent as a ghost, then another, then dozens. Gunfire split the dark, the hollow lit with muzzle flashes. "Contact!" Hayes roared, returning fire. Morgan screamed curses, unloading in wild bursts. She steadied her breath, sighted targets, dropped them one by one. But her eyes weren't on the shadows. They were searching. And then there. Through the snow, through the smoke, through the chaos. Him. Dragging his wound, face pale but eyes still sharp, still locked on hers. Her heart clenched. The man she once loved, the enemy she now faced. The fight roared around them. Ramirez cried out as Morgan dragged him deeper into cover. Hayes barked orders over the storm of bullets. But she stood, rifle raised. And he stepped forward, pushing through the gunfire as if the world couldn't touch him. "Don't," he shouted, voice raw, carried on the wind. "It doesn't have to be this way." Her hands shook. Snow burned her skin, smoke stung her lungs. Her voice cracked. "Then why is it?" He stopped, chest heaving, eyes wide. "Because you chose them." She swallowed hard. "No, because you left me." His jaw clenched, regret flickered, but only for a heartbeat. Then the hardness returned. "Last chance, come with me, walk away from this, from them, from all of it." Her breath caught. The weight of every memory pressed against her ribs, the warmth they once shared, the love that once kept her alive, the promise of a life that could have been. But behind her, Ramirez bleeding, Hayes holding the line, Morgan fighting like a man already dead. Her squad. Her choice. Her war. She raised the rifle. His eyes widened. For a moment, silence ruled the ridge. And then she pulled the trigger. The shot cracked louder than all the others. He staggered, stared at her, eyes wide, lips parting like he wanted to speak. But no words came. Only blood. His knees buckled. He fell into the snow, red spreading like ink across white. The soldiers around him faltered, their fight unraveling. Hayes pressed the attack, driving them back into the storm. Morgan howled with vicious triumph. Ramirez whimpered prayers of thanks. But she didn't move. Her rifle lowered, her breath froze, her chest caved. Because in the snow before her wasn't just an enemy. It was the man she once loved. The man she killed. The battle ended with dawn. The survivors melted into the mountains, their torches disappearing like dying stars. The ridge lay littered with silence and bodies. The squad remained, broken, bleeding, alive. Hayes knelt beside Ramirez, bandaging him with practiced calm. Morgan scavenged ammo from the fallen, spitting curses under his breath. She stood alone, staring at the snow-stained red, the body lying still, eyes closed against the sky. Her hand slipped into her pocket, pulled the photo free. The same smile, the same eyes. Now gone. She pressed it to her lips, a tremor running through her chest. Then she folded it one last time, smaller, tighter, until it nearly disappeared. And she tucked it into the snow beside him. Not to be carried anymore, but to stay. With him. The squad prepared to move. Ramirez leaned on Hayes, weak but breathing. Morgan slung his rifle with a grunt. Hayes turned to her, his voice steady. "You ready?" She nodded, but inside she knew she'd never be ready again. They climbed down the ridge, leaving behind the snow, the silence, the scars. Every step forward was heavier than the last, every breath colder. But they moved, because survival demanded it, because war didn't wait for grief, and because sometimes the only way to honor the dead was to keep walking. As the mountain faded behind them, Hayes glanced at her. "You did what you had to do." Her eyes burned, but she said nothing. Because some truths didn't need words. Some scars only silence could explain. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.